Hello everyone, there's a moment, quiet, unassuming, almost invisible to the outside world, when she leans in, her arms finding their way around you. A hug, it lasts seconds, maybe less. But inside that embrace lives an entire conversation neither of you will ever put into words. Her body says, I feel safe here. Or maybe, I'm testing how close I can get. And yours is answering, whether you realize it or not. You see, the way you respond to a hug is not just about touch. It's about energy, presence, and the subtle language of connection. It's about whether you make her feel like she's melting into a man she won't stop thinking about, or just another pair of arms she'll forget by morning. Most men think a hug is just an automatic gesture. Squeeze, release, move on. But for a woman, it can be a doorway to memory, desire, and longing, if you know how to answer it in a way that stays with her. And that's where most men get it wrong. They don't feel the pause. They don't lean into the silence. They don't use the hug as an invitation for her to remember the way your presence shifted her breathing. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to respond so that long after you've let go, she still feels you holding her. Have you ever noticed how a hug can feel completely different depending on who gives it? One person wraps their arms around you and it feels polite, mechanical, like two mannequins pressed together for a photo. Another person hugs you and suddenly you feel your chest unclench, your breath deepen, your guard drop. It's not just their arms, it's something unspoken, a presence that lingers even after they've let go. For women, a hug is rarely just a hug. It's a pulse check on the connection she feels with you. It's her body asking, do I feel safe here? Do I feel seen? Do I feel wanted? And whether you realize it or not, your answer comes through not in what you say, but in what you are in that moment. Most men rush it. They think the hug is a box to tick before moving on to what they consider more important moments, conversation, flirting, kissing, intimacy. But here's the truth, the hug is the intimacy. It's where you prove, without a single word, that you know how to hold her not just physically, but emotionally. And when a woman feels that, she remembers it. So, how do you respond to a hug in a way that keeps you living in her mind long after? It begins with presence. The moment her arms wrap around you, slow everything down, not in a creepy, exaggerated way. This isn't about holding on so long she wonders if you've lost track of time, but in a grounded, conscious way. Feel the way your bodies align, the rhythm of her breathing, the way her weight rests into you. Don't immediately pat her back or squeeze and release like you're signaling a transaction is complete. That's what people do when they're strangers who just happen to know each other's names. Instead, let there be a moment of stillness, a space where your body says, I'm here with you and nowhere else. That presence is magnetic because it's rare. Most men aren't comfortable in stillness. They fidget, they joke, they disengage. But a man who can be fully there in her arms without rushing or breaking the connection becomes unforgettable. The second element is the subtle calibration of your touch. Too loose, and it feels indifferent, like you're hugging your aunt at a family gathering. Too tight, and it feels possessive or invasive. The magic is in holding her just firmly enough that she feels anchored, yet not restrained. Your embrace should feel like a harbor, not a cage. Think of it as giving her room to breathe while making her feel undeniably contained in your presence. One of the most powerful things you can do during that moment is breathe. Not shallow, quick breaths, but deep, steady ones that she can feel against her body. Breath is contagious. If you're grounded and calm, her nervous system will pick up on it. Without even realizing why, she'll feel more relaxed in your arms. And when she associates that physical calm with you, she'll crave being close to you again. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Something most men never think about. Every hug has an ending, but how you let go matters just as much as how you held her. Too sudden, and it feels like rejection. Too drawn out, and it can turn awkward. The secret, release her slowly enough that she feels the loss of your touch, not just the absence of it. That subtle lingering, the way your hand might trail gently down her back as you part, or the way your chest stays close for a fraction of a second before stepping away, creates a ghost of sensation that will stay with her. You're not clinging, you're not overstaying, you're allowing her to notice the space between you, and in that space, she realizes she misses the connection already. That's how memory works, not in the moments of contact, but in the moments when contact has just ended. This is why responding to a hug is an art. It's not about making it longer or shorter, firmer or softer. It's about being attuned. Every hug she gives you will be slightly different. Sometimes it's warm and open, other times tentative or testing. Your job is to meet her exactly where she is, without forcing her into where you want her to be. That attunement communicates emotional intelligence, and that is far more attractive than any smooth line you could deliver. Think of it like a dance, one you're both learning together in real time. When she leans in, you lean in. When she breathes, you match it. When she rests her head on you, you tilt yours slightly so she feels enclosed, not just touched. You're telling her, without words, I feel you. I'm not here to take from you. I'm here to hold this moment with you. And for a woman, that is a rare and deeply desirable experience. So many men misunderstand attraction. They think it's about big gestures, grand declarations, expensive gifts, bold moves. But often it's the smallest interactions that etch you into her memory. A hug done well is not an accessory to romance. It's the heartbeat of it. And when she walks away, if you've done it right, she won't be replaying your words in her mind. She'll be replaying how you felt. That's the first shift, realizing that a hug is not a formality. It's a conversation in the oldest language humans know. And when you respond with presence, calibrated touch, and a graceful ending, you're no longer just another man she's hugged. You're the man whose arms she wants to find again. The moment you start seeing a hug as a living, breathing exchange rather than a static gesture, something changes. It stops being about the mechanics of two bodies touching and becomes about the transmission of an entire emotional atmosphere. And here's the thing, she can feel whether that atmosphere is intentional or accidental. If your arms wrap around her without any awareness, she might still register warmth, but it's fleeting, shallow. When your embrace is deliberate, when you've tuned into her energy, matched it, and offered your own steady presence, it creates something entirely different. It becomes a moment she replays later alone, when the room is quiet and her thoughts wander back to you. But presence alone isn't enough. If you want her to think about you long after the hug ends, you have to let your body speak a language she understands instinctively, the language of contrast. Contrast is what makes a moment feel alive. Too much of the same sensation and it becomes flat. Too much stillness and she wonders if you're disconnected. Too much movement and she feels unsettled. But a dance between firmness and softness, between steadiness and subtle change, that's what draws her deeper into the experience without her even knowing why. Imagine holding her with enough strength that she feels the frame of your body, the anchor, the safety, but then softening your grip ever so slightly, enough for her to sense you're not holding her because you need to, but because you choose to. That small release of pressure signals something profound. I trust you to stay here. It makes her feel invited, not captured. Women remember how a man makes them feel about themselves in his presence. And a hug is your chance to make her feel desired without being devoured, cherished without being smothered. You do that through this very balance, strong enough to be felt, gentle enough to be wanted. Then, there's the matter of your hands. Most men keep them static, flat on her back or shoulders, because they're afraid to break some imaginary rule. But hands can be storytellers, not in an overt, wandering way that can feel intrusive, but in subtle anchoring movements, a slow grounding sweep down her back before you let go, a light trace along her shoulder blade as if you're memorizing the shape of her. These small, almost imperceptible touches plant seeds of sensation that bloom later in her mind. And here's a secret that women rarely articulate, but often feel when you respond to a hug with emotional presence. Your face becomes part of the embrace. If your expression is blank, distracted, or overly calculated, she'll sense the disconnect. But if your eyes soften, if there's the faintest curl of a smile, not a grin, but that warm, knowing expression that says you're exactly where you want to be, then you're communicating something beyond the physical. You're saying, I see you, and I like what I see. Even your breathing becomes part of that message. Earlier, we talked about deep, steady breaths to help her body relax. But beyond relaxation, breath can create intimacy. When you exhale slowly, especially toward the end of the hug, it subtly invites her to stay for a heartbeat longer. It's as if your breath is saying, don't go just yet. And more often than not, she'll respond without even thinking. Her arms will tighten, her body will linger. That's when you know you've turned a hug into something she'll carry with her. There's also the timing of when you hug. Men often think of hugs as bookends, something you do when you arrive or when you leave. But some of the most unforgettable embraces happen in the middle of things. You're walking together, you stop, she says something that makes you want to pull her close, and you do, not because the moment demands it by convention, but because you felt it. Those spontaneous, in-the-flow hugs are powerful because they feel like they belong to you too, not to social etiquette. And when you do pull her in mid-conversation or mid-walk, there's an element of surprise. Surprise sharpens memory. She wasn't expecting it, so the sensation becomes more vivid, more alive in her mind. That unexpectedness, paired with your attuned presence, becomes the kind of moment she replays when she's lying in bed at night, wondering what it would feel like if you did it again. Now, let's talk about one of the most overlooked parts of responding to a hug, listening to what her body is telling you in that instant. We often think of listening as something we do with our ears, but in connection, we listen with our skin, our chest, our arms. If she melts into you, let your body welcome that weight. Let it adjust slightly to hold her more fully. If she holds back, meet her there, giving just enough space that she doesn't feel overwhelmed. This kind of attunement is magnetic because it's rare. It shows you're not just hugging for yourself, you're responding to her. And here's where the mind starts to play its role. A hug isn't just about what happens in the moment. It's about what it triggers afterward. The more you infuse that embrace with sensory detail, her feeling your steady breath, your warmth, the subtle texture of your shirt against her cheek, the more her her brain has to hold on to. These are the threads she'll weave into her memory of you. When she thinks of you days later, she won't be picturing the entire scene in crisp detail. She'll remember flashes, the way your hand felt at the small of her back, the way your breath slowed hers, the way she felt steadier just from being in your arms. And because those sensations are tied to an emotional state, safety, desire, connection, they'll linger far longer than any words you could have spoken. It's not about making every hug a cinematic moment. It's about creating a pattern in her mind where your presence equals comfort, attraction, and mystery all at once. Every time you meet, every time your arms find each other, you're reinforcing that association. And the more you reinforce it, the harder it is for her to forget you. When you hold someone, you're not just touching their body, you're touching their history. Every woman you will ever hug has been held before. Some embraces in her past may have been safe, others clumsy, others filled with longing. Some may have been moments she wanted to last forever, while others she wanted to end the instant they began. Whether she's aware of it or not, she carries all of these memories into every new embrace. And when she steps into your arms, those memories don't disappear. They influence how she feels you. This is why a hug can either be forgettable or transformative. Forgettable hugs happen when you exist only in your own skin, unaware of hers. Transformative hugs happen when you hold her in a way that allows her to rewrite something in her own story, when she feels more seen, more accepted, more desired than she did in those moments before you. That's the art we're talking about here, anchoring yourself in her mind, not just because of the mechanics of your touch, but because of the meaning your touch carries. Here's where psychology steps in. Our brains are wired to attach meaning to moments of heightened emotion. If she feels an emotional shift while she's in your arms, whether it's safety after a stressful day, warmth after a lonely week, or desire after hours of subtle tension, that moment gets stamped in her memory. The next time she sees you, or even just hears your name, her body will remember before her mind does. Her pulse may quicken, her breathing may deepen, and she won't be entirely sure why. This is not manipulation, it's resonance. You're not implanting false feelings, you're creating genuine experiences worth remembering. So how do you create that resonance in a hug? It begins with the way you enter it. Most people think of a hug as a collision, two people moving in and connecting. But what if the approach was part of the intimacy? Imagine you're standing close talking, and she makes a small gesture, a laugh, a glance down, a slight lean toward you. Instead of abruptly reaching for her, let your movement toward her be slow, intentional. Close the space between you with a sense of inevitability, like the hug is not just happening to you both, but through you both. That anticipation, those half seconds where she realizes what's coming, activates her senses. Once you're in the embrace, this is where your body becomes the message. Earlier we spoke about contrast, but here we add curation. Not every hug should feel the same, because not every moment is the same. Sometimes you meet her energy with stillness, letting her feel the peace in your frame. Other times you let your hand move in a small, circular motion at the middle of her back, a subconscious signal that says, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what the moment calls for. Women feel the difference between a man who hugs because it's habit and a man who hugs because he's reading the moment. And when she feels read, she feels known. When she feels known, she trusts you more. And trust is the soil where desire grows roots. Now let's talk about something men often miss, the emotional echo. The emotional echo is what remains in her after the hug ends. If you break contact like you're shutting a door, the echo is silence. But if you let the ending breathe, if you allow your fingers to graze her arm as you step back, or keep your eyes on hers for just a moment longer, you create a lingering vibration. It's like the last note of a song hanging in the air after the music stops. That echo is what will visit her later when she least expects it, driving home, lying in bed, standing in line at the store. Part of creating that echo comes from engaging her senses. Sight and touch are obvious, but sound and even scent can deepen the imprint you leave. If you speak softly as you hug, maybe a good to see you, in a tone that feels personal rather than polite, it threads your voice into the memory. If your natural scent or the faint hint of your cologne is present without being overpowering, her brain will anchor that smell to the feeling you gave her. Later, if she catches a whiff of something similar in the air, the memory of you can rush back uninvited. What you're doing here is weaving yourself into her sensory map, but in a way that feels organic, not strategic. That's the difference between a man she thinks about and a man she can't stop thinking about. You didn't just pass through her day. You touched multiple layers of her experience at once. And then there's the silence. Many men rush to fill every space with words, but silence in a hug can be electric. It can say more than a compliment ever could. When you allow that moment to exist without commentary, you let her feel instead of think. Thinking fades, feeling lingers. Here's the paradox: to stay in her mind forever, you have to let her go in a way that makes her want to come back. That means you don't cling. You don't overplay it. You don't make the hug your only move. You simply leave her with the undeniable sense that something shifted in her because she was close to you. And you trust that her own curiosity will pull her toward you again. Some men try to force this kind of connection, treating it like a trick or a formula. But the truth is, authenticity is the magic ingredient. If you are genuinely present, if you are genuinely attuned, then she will feel it. A hug can be many things: comfort, celebration, reunion, consolation. When it's all of those and more, wrapped in the unspoken certainty that you wanted to be there with her in that exact moment, it becomes a moment she doesn't want to let go of. And perhaps the most powerful part of this is that she may never be able to fully explain why she keeps thinking about you. She might tell herself it's your confidence, your kindness, your presence. But deep down, her body will remember that when she was in your arms, the world felt quieter, safer, more alive. And that feeling is something we are all wired to seek again. That's the imprint you want to leave, not just the memory of your touch, but the experience of who you were in that touch. Because long after your arms release her, long after you both move on with your day, that experience will keep speaking to her in the language she feels most deeply, the language of connection. There's a delicate alchemy in human connection, a push and pull that keeps two people orbiting each other with just enough gravity to stay close, yet enough space to keep desire alive. In a hug, that alchemy comes down to one thing: tension. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that heightens awareness, makes the air between you feel charged, and leaves her wondering what else lives inside your touch. We tend to think of a hug as a release, an exhale, a melting into someone's arms. And yes, there's comfort in that. But comfort alone doesn't always keep you in her mind. What does is a dance between comfort and curiosity. When you know how to give her both in the same embrace, you turn something ordinary into something she replays again and again, searching for the unnameable thing she felt. So how do you create that balance? It starts with timing. Not every hug should begin the moment your bodies meet. Sometimes the most memorable embrace is one that doesn't happen right away. You're close, maybe standing shoulder to shoulder, maybe facing each other in conversation. There's a moment, a pause, where it's clear you could step in, but instead you let that pause breathe. Your eyes meet, your smile lingers. You let her feel the space between you before you close it. That waiting builds anticipation, and anticipation is desire's favorite playground. When you finally move in, the embrace feels earned, chosen, inevitable. She will remember that delay because her mind had time to imagine what it would feel like before it happened. And once imagination is involved, the memory becomes far more vivid. When you do step in, the initial contact matters. Instead of locking your arms instantly, let the embrace unfold. Maybe your hands find her shoulders or upper arms first, guiding her gently toward you. This slight staging tells her, I'm bringing you in, which is very different from I'm taking you. One feels intentional and inviting, the other can feel abrupt. And then, once she's in your arms, you create tension through micro movements. These are tiny adjustments: the subtle tightening of your arms halfway through the hug, the slight shift of your stance so she's even closer, the slow exhale against her hair or cheek. Each of these moments keeps her present in the experience, keeps her wondering what you'll do next. Too many men hold a hug like they're holding a pose, static, predictable. But desire thrives on unpredictability, not chaos, but gentle variation that keeps her engaged in the now. Of course, tension is not just physical, it's emotional. The way you let her feel you're both here in the hug and somewhere else in your thoughts can be intoxicating. Maybe you hold her like you don't want to let go. But your eyes, when you eventually meet them again, carry a question, a hint of mystery. That unspoken something makes her curious about what lives in your mind. Humans are drawn to mystery because it invites them to keep seeking. Another layer to this is what I call the almost let go. It's when you start to release her, maybe loosen your arms, but then she feels you hold her again for just a second longer, not in a needy way. This is not about hesitation or insecurity. It's about showing that part of you didn't want the connection to end. That small interruption in the expected rhythm becomes a ripple in her memory. It makes her wonder, what made him hold me again? That wondering will keep you alive in her thoughts. There's also the art of using your environment. A hug in a noisy, bustling space can feel protective. Your body becomes a barrier between her and the world. A hug in a quiet, intimate setting can feel like a whisper, a secret moment that belongs only to the two of you. If you're aware of the space you're in and respond to it, maybe leaning in a little more in a crowd or slowing down in silence, she feels that attunement. And attunement is deeply attractive because it tells her you're not just present, you're perceptive. Timing also plays a role in when you let the hug happen in the flow of your interaction. A hug at the very end of a meeting or date can feel like a punctuation mark, final closing, but a hug midway through can reset the energy, deepen connection without signaling an ending. It's like slipping an extra scene into a movie. You think you know the storyline, then something unexpected draws you deeper. That midstream intimacy can be far more potent than the obligatory farewell embrace. And then there's restraint. Restraint is not withholding. It's knowing you could go further but choosing not to. In a hug, that might mean pulling her close, letting her feel the heat of your body, and then stepping back before the moment tips into something else. It leaves her suspended between satisfaction and longing. That space is where memory thrives. When she's not sure if she got all of you, she'll keep wondering what the rest feels like. But restraint works only if it's genuine, if you're not acting out a script but truly reading the moment and choosing to leave some things unsaid, undone. Women can feel when you're following a formula. The goal here isn't to manipulate her into wanting more, it's to honor the truth that connection is built in layers, and sometimes leaving room for the next layer is what keeps her coming back. Now, an important truth, not every hug should carry this charged tension. If every time you embrace her feels like a seduction, it loses its texture. The power is in variation. Some hugs are light, playful, teasing, like you're letting her know you can have fun together. Others are grounding, reassuring, moments where you hold her like she's the only solid thing in the room. And then there are the charged ones, the ones we've been talking about, that blur the line between comfort and desire. That range is what makes you unforgettable, because she never knows exactly which version of you she's going to get, only that she likes all of them. Remember, emotional tension is not the same as emotional pressure. Tension invites her in, pressure pushes her away. The difference lies in whether she feels free to step out of the moment. In every hug, no matter how magnetic, she should feel that she could move back at any second, and you would let her go without resistance. That freedom is what makes the closeness feels safe, and paradoxically, safety is what makes her want to stay longer. When you master this balance of timing, micro-movements, restraint, and variation, you become the man whose embrace is not just something she experiences, but something she anticipates. And anticipation is a far more powerful hook than any single moment could ever be. It stretches time. It keeps her thinking about the next time before this time has even fully ended. The truth is, a hug is never just a hug when it's given with awareness. It's a conversation without words, a negotiation between two bodies about how close they're willing to get and how long they're willing to stay there. And when you can make that conversation feel alive, unpredictable, and deeply personal, you don't just stay in her mind, you stay in her body's memory, which is far harder to erase. The moment you let go is not the end. In fact, it's the beginning of what she will carry with her. A hug may only last a few seconds, but the way it ends and what follows in the minutes, hours, and days after determines whether she stores it as a pleasant memory or as a moment that refuses to fade. Think of it like a song. The final note matters, but what truly lingers is the echo, the way the melody hangs in the air, the way you find yourself humming it later without realizing. That's the space you want to live in after the hug ends, the echo. When you release her, don't step back as if you've completed a chore. Let there be a softness to the movement, a gradual transition rather than an abrupt break. If you're holding her with both arms, let one slide away first, then the other, so her body feels the easing of your presence rather than the absence of it. This sends a subconscious message: I'm letting go, but I'm not disappearing. In those first seconds after separation, keep your attention on her. Too many men break a hug and immediately turn away, check their phone, or redirect their focus elsewhere. This makes the hug feel like a prelude to something more important. Instead, linger in the aftermath, hold her gaze for a beat, let your eyes say something your mouth doesn't rush to fill. That pause is potent. It gives her mind space to register what just happened. Small physical gestures after a hug can amplify its memory. A gentle touch on her arm as you talk, a light brush of your hand against hers as you move. These are not grand displays, they are breadcrumbs. And breadcrumbs lead her back to the warmth she just felt in your arms. Words can also seal the memory, but only if they're sincere and understated. Something as simple as, "It's good to hold you," can do more than a dozen rehearsed compliments. Why? Because it's present, tense, and personal. It's about this moment with her. She'll remember that you noticed the connection, not just the fact of her existence. Now, here's where psychology works in your favor. Memory is reinforced by emotion and repetition. If the hug stirred something in her, comfort, excitement, longing, those feelings will be recalled when she sees or hears from you again. The sooner you touch that thread after the hug, the stronger it becomes. That doesn't mean texting her the second you part ways. In fact, a small delay allows her to live with the memory before you reappear. When you do reach out, you can reference something small and specific from the hug without overplaying it. A message like, "Still smiling," from earlier is light, but it anchors you in her mind without effort. The environment in which you leave her also shapes the memory. If the hug happens before you part ways, the next moments become part of the story. If you make her laugh, if you share something thoughtful, if you walk away with an energy that's confident but not rushed, those elements wrap around the hug like a frame. She doesn't remember moments in isolation. She remembers them as part of a sequence. Make sure the sequence supports the feeling you want her to keep. One of the most overlooked aspects of staying in her mind is contrast, what she feels when you're gone compared to what she felt when you were there. If your presence is warm, grounding, and attentive, the contrast of your absence creates a small ache, not a painful one, but a pleasant awareness of missing you. That's the space where longing grows. And longing is the seed of attraction that keeps blooming over time. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave her wanting more, not in a calculated game-playing way, but in the sense that you don't exhaust the moment. You don't overstay. You don't turn the hug into a performance that demands attention. You let it be what it was, intimate, complete, and then you let it go, trusting that she will return to it in her mind on her own. That trust in the connection signals security and self-assurance, qualities that make you even harder to forget. Another way to deepen the imprint is through what I call sensory triggers. If there's a subtle, consistent element in your presence, perhaps the faint scent of your cologne, the texture of your jacket, the timbre of your voice, it can act as a memory key. The next time she encounters that scent, that texture, or that sound, her body recalls the hug before her mind even names it. This is why certain songs, smells, or even fabrics can transport us instantly to a moment from years ago. You can't fake this. It comes from being consistent in the little details that naturally belong to you. It's also worth remembering that the hug is not the whole of who you are. It's an expression of it. The more you embody the quality she feels in your arms, confidence, presence, warmth in the rest of your interactions, the more the hug becomes a symbol of you. If you're attentive in conversation, if you make her feel seen when you're apart, the hug transforms from a one-time gesture into a physical representation of your connection. When you leave her, you don't want her just thinking about the hug. You want her thinking about you through the lens of the hug. She'll replay the way you made her feel, and that feeling will color her anticipation of seeing you again. This is how a simple embrace turns into an emotional anchor. And finally, there's a truth we often forget in the pursuit of staying on someone's mind. You can't force genuine memory. You can only create conditions where connection can root itself deeply. If you approach every hug with awareness, if you let it be as much about her as it is about you, if you respect the natural rhythm of closeness and distance, you will not need to try to stay on her mind. You already will be. When she thinks back, she won't just remember your arms around her. She'll remember the pause before you drew her in. She'll remember the way her breath matched yours. She'll remember that when you let go, part of her wished you hadn't. And long after the details blur, that wish will remain. That is how you respond to a hug and stay on her mind forever. Not by making the hug bigger, longer, or more dramatic, but by making it real in its timing, real in its touch, real in its ending. Because real is what lasts. And in a world of forgettable touches, a real one is impossible to erase.